confused about the link. I just called him. He's joining.
Very good. Very good. So,
You're live on YouTube.
perfect. And here's Amar. Paul, you'll have to keep admitting people now. I'm going to go start our thing, our webinar. Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Hello and welcome to another webinar organized by the International Manifesto Group. The International Manifesto Group is an international socialist and anti-imperialist group supporting the emergence of a multi- and pluripolar world. Our most important activity is holding these webinars about twice a month, informing audiences around the world on key developments that are shaping the struggle for a multipolar, equal, peaceful and sustainable world. Please check us out at www.internationalmanifesto.org. My name is Radhika Desai. I'm the convener of the International Manifesto Group and I will be moderating this event. Our topic today is the Anti-Imperialist Conference in Lahore, and key participants today will report back from it. I was also there, and I want to begin by framing the event as best as I can. I should, of course, clarify that in doing so, while I'm moderating it as the convener of the International Manifesto Group, these views are, of course, my own. Changing historical circumstances can make the unlikely not only likely, but entirely natural. 5 years ago, it would have seemed highly unlikely that a new left party would be formed in Pakistan, that it would hold an international conference on anti-imperialist and socialist themes, that it would be held in Lahore, barely 30 kilometers from the highly flammable Indian border, and thus the most militarized city in a country dominated by an army historically hostile to the left. And even if all this had happened, it would have at best been regarded as a pleasant curiosity, eliciting bemused smiles from the few well-wishers whose attention it had caught. This past May, however, not only did all this happen, much more did, and in circumstances that rendered the event far more significant. A party called the Haqooq-e-Khalq Party, or the Rights of the People Party, HKP for short, was formed in Pakistan, sensing the enormous political churn in the country following the election of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf movement or Movement for Justice Party, led by the popular and populist former cricketer Imran Khan, his removal and later imprisonment by the army, the imposition of another IMF structural adjustment program, and many other developments besides. On the 3rd of May 2026, the HKP held an international anti-imperialist conference subtitled "The War to Recolonize the South and the Struggle for Sovereignty." Just as it had caught the wave of domestic churn and change, so the HKP sought to do that internationally. The conference was premised on detecting a fundamental change in imperialism and its practices in the aftermath on the attacks on Gaza, Venezuela, Iran, and calling on its participants to name it, understand it, and fight it. It was my unbelievable good fortune to be present at this conference and to make it the occasion of my first ever visit to Pakistan. I should say here that it is usually extremely difficult, if not impossible, for people of Indian origin to get a visa to visit Pakistan and vice versa. Keeping the citizens of the two countries who are united by a culture, a language, and social mores tragically divided these 80 years and more since the devastating partition. It was also my good fortune to be part of the events surrounding the conference, including a public rally, meetings held, both of them held in Urdu, a language that I am fortunate enough to speak, and some astonishingly informative and thought-provoking discussions, both with ordinary party members and intellectuals. Amid all this, I felt two things powerfully: that I was among cousins, and that I was present at the creation of something profoundly important, potentially earth-shaking. The conference seemed to ride the vertiginous crest of a tumultuous historical wave of change sweeping the world, consisting of wars, genocide, and crises to be sure, but also destroying so much of the old order that one cannot but hope, even though this may be through tears of sorrow, that something new and better will take its place. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean something fairly concrete. I feel that a number of key elements seem to weave together to make me feel as if the conference in Lahore might, in retrospect, be remembered as if not the spark that ignited a prairie fire of a rolling revolution. Let me just enumerate these 5 odd points that I feel that explain why I am saying what I'm saying. There have been many calls for a new international. Samir Amin issued one before we lost him. Russia's Just Russia party called for the refoundation of what it calls a Sovintern, clearly modeled on the Comintern. And before that, Alan Freeman and I wrote a call for such a party back in 2023. The Lahore Declaration calls for one, if not explicitly. However, the distinction of the Lahore Declaration, as I should add also the distinction of the International Manifesto, Group Manifesto, lies in underlining, and I'm quoting the Lahore Declaration here, the centrality of the state as a bulwark against imperialism. The struggle for sovereignty, it says, cannot proceed without state-led efforts to develop productive capacities and generate forms of accumulation that can be recycled into development, including within the sphere of military production, as the guarantor of other forms of sovereign development. This recognition is in line with the IMG's manifesto, which clearly says that classes and nations fighting for socialism must advance in solidarity. In this advance, some governments and movements, such as that of Iran or a movement like Yemen's Ansarallah, for example, may at first glance appear to be strange fellow travelers for working people and their socialist nations and movements. However, they are subject to imperialist aggression, war, blockades, economic and financial sanctions, color revolutions, and regime changes. And they're subject to all of this for good reason, I'm sure, and therefore deserve at least anti-imperialist solidarity. So that's my first point. Secondly, the conference was held by a new party of peasants and workers. There are dozens of such parties in the third world. However, I felt that the HKP was more. It has sought to mobilize the mass of working people by linking up with their organizations, including trade unions, and seeking to mobilize, inform, and offer support for their struggles, not engaged in some kind of vain attempt at re-educating them or raising their consciousness or any such thing. It is explicitly committed to including the disparate regions of Pakistan. It is not sectarian, but part of a larger 5-party alliance, which includes the forces represented by Imran Khan, on the explicit understanding that no matter the virtues and vices of their leader, the movement as a whole represents a deep and wide hunger for radical transformation in Pakistan. And finally, the party, the Rights of the People Party, the Haqooq-e-Khalq party, they are not trying to exploit the rift between India and Pakistan, which is, of course, as old as the nations themselves, for political purposes, but seek a peaceful settlement of one of the bloodiest and most tragic divides ever to have been exploited by colonialism. Thirdly, the formation and activities of the party have been permitted by a military which, for all its limitations and storied abuses of power, has historically seen itself as the ultimate guarantor of the Pakistani state, and today finds itself catapulted in the center of international affairs, thanks to its historic initiative to mediate between a militarily resolute Iran and a Trump administration that is defeated, but is looking for a face-saving off-ramp, no matter how flimsy and ramshackle it may turn out to be. This is possible chiefly because over the past decade, since the launching of the Pakistan-China Economic Corridor and various other developments, Pakistan and its leadership, including its military leadership, have finally found a new position in world affairs, no longer a client state of the United States, no longer, as one of its most famous sons, the intellectual Tariq Ali, put it, the condom that the United States used to enter Afghanistan. No longer the pariah that it had become with its utility in Afghanistan exhausted. And with India sidling up to the US in an ever closer embrace, with ordinary people aroused against the US-sponsored genocide in Gaza, and it's, of course, the recent war on Iran, Pakistan's victory in the recent war against India, of course, has been very important. So all of this has made the leadership realize that today it is and must be an independent actor, capable of playing an independent role. The contrast with India's silence and even shame of complicity with Israel and the United States could not be greater. A fourth reason why the Third May conference and my being in Lahore at that time seemed so hopeful is that that the last many years of turmoil have not left the educated classes, the professional managerial classes, we may call them, unaffected. They too have suffered, and typically in such circumstances, history has aligned them with the working masses. Over 4 decades of neoliberalism, during which nearly everywhere Latin America with its pink tide was perhaps an exception, the historic alignment of the professional managerial classes or the intellectual classes with working people had been sundered, and the professional managerial classes appeared to benefit from neoliberalism just as much as ordinary working people suffered from it. This situation is ending. It's ending nearly everywhere, and a new revolutionary wave is possible. After all, Marx and Engels themselves said in the Communist Manifesto that revolutions occur when the middle classes are compelled to throw their lot in with the working people. And finally, I should say that though Western intellectuals were invited, they were carefully chosen for their commitment to anti-imperialism and all that which this position entails today, including an understanding that the road to socialism taken by working people and by states committed to organizing economies in their favor is the way to go. This is what the HKP is trying to compel the Pakistani state to do, and the purpose of the intellectual network they are trying to create is to aid in this effort. Whatever the outcome of these initiatives, it is unlikely to be a revolution erupting and completing its task in one loud thunderclap. It is more likely to roll over countries and peoples over a certain period, which is not of short duration. So with these remarks, I'd like to turn to our speakers. Amar, first of all, is Helia Dutahi here or is she not here? Can someone please tell me? Oh, she's not here. Okay, so, but Amar Ali Jan is here. So let me ask him to start us off. Each of our speakers will speak for about 12 to 15 minutes max, more 10 to 12 minutes max, sorry. And we have 6 speakers, and then we will go to a brief question and answer session, at which point people who wish to pose questions, of course, can unmute themselves, etc. And we will try to close this at the 2-hour mark, but if there's more interest, we may go a little bit over. So with that, let me hand it over to Amar. Amar, please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Radhika, and thank you everyone for being here. Also, thank you for coming to Pakistan. You know, you have a very dedicated following over there, especially amongst the youth who are looking for answers, looking for an alternative. I also would like to thank the People's Academy, who were the sponsors and collaborated with us in hosting this conference in Lahore. So I want to divide my conversation in 2 parts. One is the overall global historical framework in which it felt that this was the urgent task for the movement in Pakistan to hold this kind of an anti-imperialist conference. And the other is the history of Pakistan and the trajectory of Pakistan that you yourself also explained just now, and how this conference fits into the politics that are shaping Pakistani society and the region at the moment. So to begin with, modernity has been experienced by people in the global south partly as a form of a counter-revolution, the imperialist counter-revolution. So unlike, in the global north, where modernity kind of brings these questions of equality, fraternity, development, we've experienced it as exploitation, as a humiliation, as the alienation of our rights, the alienation of our sovereignty. And this word sovereignty is the key. The fact that we were humiliated, exploited, decimated, was because our sovereignty, our state sovereignty, was destroyed. It was snatched. So where you had these ideas of republicanism and nationalism in the West, what we had were alien states, alien governments that were controlling our parts of the world. And they were using our resources to basically develop their own regions, which is why, it's basically the same time when the Industrial Revolution kind of escalates in England. It's the same time when India or the subcontinent starts deindustrializing. So, our people were being sacrificed so that, Manchester could look prettier or London could become more beautiful. So, this is a very kind of a class divide at a global level that is very essential to the consciousness of people born in the global south. It is an essential feature with which we, grow up. There's a geographical divide over how we imagine, where we imagine we need to study if we want to do well in life. Where do we need to get recognition from in terms of skills, jobs, all of that. So there's that kind of a historical consciousness that's been there since the colonial modernity. Since 1945, you have these twin moments that you have the birth of the nation state, the post-colonial moment in the global south, which gave people a lot of hope. I mean, with all its problems, it for the first time, there was this debate that you can actually have surplus recycled within our societies. So this is a moment of great hope, but it's also the moment of the birth of NATO, of the US empire, and the CIA, which become the center of the world counter-revolution. And Pakistan basically is also born in the midst of these two contradictory tendencies. One, the possibility of a sovereign development project and its rollback by the CIA, by the US, by NATO, and eventually by the IMF, World Bank, and the entire financial architecture created by the West. And until the 80s, 90s, you had this intense battle between the global south and imperialism, which in some ways, with the rise of neoliberalism and the defeat of the Soviet Union, and here I want to emphasize, the defeat of the Soviet Union was not a cause of celebration for movements in the global south. Even those that were critical of the Soviet Union, that were critical of the Eastern Bloc, anytime people sought solidarity, these were the countries that they looked towards. People don't remember this enough, but East Germany provided a lot of solidarity to comrades from across the world. Same is with the case with the Soviet Union, with Poland, with others. So you had an entire world that collapsed, an entire possibility that collapsed. And whereas it was seen as some kind of a moment of freedom and democracy, in reality, you had the absolute decimation of our economies, the neoliberal turn that destroyed Latin America, Africa, Asia, and our part of the world had another dimension within this kind of neoliberal turn that happened, which was the militarization of the region. Already in the 1980s, we were used in the Afghan jihad, where the US and the CIA carried out this massive operation of basically turning the entire region into a base camp for a religious war against the Soviet Union. So this is in the 80s. And then the 90s was a time where they were trying to fight the effects of this war. You had this low-scale war on terror prior to the war on terror in Somalia, sometimes in Pakistan, sanctions on Yemen and other parts of the world, attacks on Iran. And then after 9/11, you have an escalation of this war on terror. You have the destruction of Afghanistan, the destruction of Iraq, the destruction of Yemen, the destruction of Syria, the destruction of Libya, the attempted destruction of Iran, the genocide in Gaza, the genocidal violence in Lebanon. So what you have is this intensification of the militarization of West Asia, the destruction of West Asia carried out by the Zionist and imperialist forces. And then on the other side, you have the attempt to lay siege to China, which again means a number of bases that were not just created, but also the militarization was escalated over there in Korea, in Japan, in Taiwan, and the other parts. So we're a region that is extremely, extremely militarized, not to mention, Pakistan and India's problems as well. So we are a generation that has seen the destruction of states, not as an emancipatory moment, but as something that reduces us to a planet of ruins, to a situation where you no longer have civil society, where you no longer have the possibility of development, you no longer have the possibility of democracy, let alone socialism. This very destruction of state power, and with it, the ideas of citizenship and republicanism, it kind of created a situation of warlordism. And we've experienced in our history that when you don't have your own state, that doesn't mean you are in some anarchist utopia. You are under some other state. You're under the Zionists, or you're under the US, or the British, or the French. This is one reason why the way the left is thinking about the question of sovereignty, not just in Pakistan, but I believe across West Asia, is relatively different from the way it is being thought out in Europe. And that is to say, we are taking the question of sovereignty very seriously, because to allow the states to get destroyed, your position kind of starts aligning with Pentagon's vision, or with Marco Rubio's speech at Munich at the security conference. So it's very important to maintain that the condition of possibility for any kind of socialist project is some semblance of cohesion that the state offers. Now, that does not mean that automatically means it's progressive. Then you have the struggle for the transformation of the state, so that it can become a vehicle in the hands of the people to change society, to develop, to create socialism. So I think other speakers can talk about it in more detail. I would just conclude with talking a little bit about Pakistan. Pakistan has two trajectories that have always been part of its history. One is that it's been a state that's been aligned with the US. We were part of these two pacts, CETO-CENTO, these two security pacts with the US in the 1950s. And since then, one can largely, broadly say that we've been in the American camp. However, there's a subterranean history that a lot of people miss when they talk about Pakistan. And I think it's important to recognize that there has been an element of nationalist assertion from the very beginning, including in 1947, when 2 weeks after independence, the Karachi airport was being used by Dutch airplanes that were refueling in Karachi to bomb the Indonesian resistance. And the founder of Pakistan grounded those planes and also sent 600 soldiers to fight in the liberation of Indonesia. Also, we rejected Israel, the existence of Israel. So, Pakistan is one of the few countries whose passport says that you can't go to Israel. Also, in the Algerian independence struggle, Ben Bella, when he couldn't travel, Pakistan gave him a diplomatic passport so that he could travel across the world and mobilize against the French. In the Suez Canal crisis, we supported Nasser and Egypt, and we had very close relations with Libya's Qaddafi. One of our big cricket stadiums is called Qaddafi Stadium. So there's that entire subterranean history. Not to mention, very early on, for security reasons, we became very close to China. And that friendship developed in the 1960s. And we were, our leadership was very close to Lin Bao, Chairman Mao, and others. And eventually at this stage, 80% of Pakistan's military imports come from China. And one of the reasons why Pakistan was able to successfully defend itself against the Indian aggression last year was because of this military relationship between China and Pakistan. And this is also the reason that Pakistan, despite all the pressure in the world, was able to build a nuclear bomb. So there's that kind of subterranean history that has existed. Now, what is the problem? Why do we need a party like the HKP? Why are we in the opposition with Imran Khan? Is because these two trajectories are colliding now. The US camp and the Chinese camp. And we have to be conscious here. In our elites, subjectively, they are pro-US. Their bank accounts are in the West. Their families live in the West. They want to travel to the West. So the subjective factor is taking them to the West. Objectively, however, our requirements, whether these are defense requirements or our economic requirements, they can only be fulfilled within the region, particularly in collaboration with China, because the IMF gives us nothing but punishing austerity. There's a gap between the objective march of history and the subjective whims of our elites. And this is partly the reason why there's repression in Pakistan right now, despite the possibilities that have opened up. And the opposition, including the opposition alliance that we are, HKP, is a part of, we are pushing this line that we have to cut the gap between the objective and the subjective. We have to subjectively become the force that pushes the movement of history forward. We have better relations today with Iran. We have good relations, very good relations with China. We can integrate further in the region if we have a conscious program for national sovereign development. And this is a historic opportunity because of the various things that have happened over the past few years, and Pakistan's security needs are more and more integrated into the region. And America's belligerence makes it a less likely ally in the coming years. But our elites, because they're parasitical elites, they will not be able to develop the country because they are running this country on borrowed money from the IMF. They take these loans, they purchase property in London, Paris, Washington, and then when you have to return the loan, they push austerity on the people. So in a way, they're sacrificing our people for these international financial institutions. 40% of people are living in poverty. You cannot have sovereignty without economic sovereignty, economic development. And this is the next big fight that we'll have to fight. And I think this declaration opens the possibility of both recognizing the gains made by countries like Pakistan and other countries, while also opening the possibility of critiquing them so that we can push history forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. I think few people could have done a better job of marking the moment, staking out the moment in which the Haqooq-e-Khalq party was born and your international initiative was taken. So thank you. And just to remind everybody, Amar Ali Jan is the Secretary General of this new party, the Rights of the People Party. Now we'll go on. So before we go on, let me just tell everyone, because I've had to change the order because we're still waiting for our comrade from Tehran to join us. So meanwhile, Amar Ali has just spoken. Pavel Vargan will speak next. Then we'll have Amina Wahid. We will then have a video from a friend, a comrade in Beijing, who it's very late there, and he's a hardworking young man, so he couldn't stay up that late. Then Mr. Zaigam Abbas, then Bikram Gill, and then finally, hopefully by then, Helie will have joined us and she will be able to speak as well from Iran. So in that order, I will now ask Pavel Vargan to speak. Just so you know, Pavel Vargan is a a researcher, an activist, coordinator of the Secretariat of the Progressive International, and also working with the People's Academy, which was one of the sponsors of the conference. And he, of course, was also at the Lahore conference. So, Pavel, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Radhika, and great to be with all of you again. In your introductory remarks, you talked about the hope that permeated the conference in Lahore. And if there's one lingering sentiment that stuck with me ever since that gathering, it's exactly that. And I want to talk a little bit about this dialectic between despair and hope on the global left. It seemed to me that since the start of this year, and this is mainly the case for the Western left, but of course not exclusively, there seems to have been this, or there seems to be this deep and crushing and immobilizing despair that permeates a lot of the movement. People are exhausted by their perceived impotence over the genocide in Gaza, which is ongoing. They're exhausted by the failures to break through, the sharpening impasses of the capitalist system. They see what happened in Venezuela on January 3rd and the tremendous setbacks that provoked. They see the tightening noose on Cuba and the horrible suffering that's causing in the country. And again, the inability of the international left to respond. They see what they perceive as insufficient action on the international stage by forces in the anti-hegemonic bloc like China and Russia, and that, in their eyes, produces, or in their political practice and thinking, produces a despair that tends towards their political incapacitation. And I was reminded of this quote by Lenin that is often cited, where he said that despair is typical of those who do not understand the causes of evil, see no way out, and are incapable of struggle. Now, I never read the full text in which from which that quote is drawn, so I looked into it, and there are two other parts of that passage that are never quoted in all the memes that use that one line. The first is that despair is typical of the classes which are perishing. I think this is a very important point, and it speaks to a kind of class orientation of some of those left forces, which are in fact not despairing about the state of the world, but are despairing about the crisis of hegemony of their worldview, which is drawn from a kind of liberal tradition more than the leftist tradition. And the other part of the quote is that the modern industrial proletariat does not belong to the category of such classes. So the modern industrial proletariat, Lenin, of course, is writing about Russia in the early 20th century, is not afflicted by that kind of despair. He says the representatives of the labor movement find that they have plenty to protest against, but nothing to despair about. And I think that's also true if we look at Iran. We see remarkable scenes of people under bombardment in the streets of Tehran, raising their fists in the direction of the bombs that are exploding in their city. We saw similar scenes from Yemen. We see people in Cuba, despite the suffocating blockade, which has been going on for 6 decades now and has only intensified this year. We see them mobilizing in the streets in darkness with no electricity. A few of us earlier this year visited Venezuela, and we met with the Chavista movements in the communes who are determined to continue building the socialist project and are prepared to take up arms in the case of a US invasion. There is tremendous resilience among the people who are on the vanguard of the global struggle, and there is very little despair. And there's also very little despair at the first anti-imperialist conference in Lahore. And so the question I want to ask is, what distinguishes a people who despair and a people who confront the struggle with the kind of resilience and the kind of boldness and the kind of hope that we see in Pakistan, in Iran, in Yemen, Cuba, and in many other parts of the world? That difference isn't genetic. That difference isn't, down to some psychological predisposition. I think the difference fundamentally is about political organization. And this question isn't academic. This question, in many ways, I think, holds the key to our century. It holds the key to the question of whether we survive an imperialism in decline that seems hell-bent on taking the world down with it, or whether we perish. in war, from the effects of climate change, or from any of the other symptoms of a declining imperialism. And I think if you trace back the path from any revolutionary project to its beginnings, you see the outlines of a methodology and of a process that you can follow to build the kind of resilience that allows you to defend your sovereignty in the ways that Amar just described in his intervention. You know, Fidel Castro once said that he began the revolution. He said, "I began the revolution with 82 men. 82 men. If I had to do it again, I could do it with 15 or 10 or 15 in absolute faith," he said. And I think there are two critical parts of that statement. The first concerns the necessity of political organization. There's so many conferences that I'm sure many of you attend on the left, that however radical they are in their veneer, they eventually retreat or regress into a kind of idealism simply because they are not constructed as part of a process of building a mass movement. You end up producing ideas for the reform of the international system, for new international institutions that don't have any historical actors to realize them. And so it's absolutely essential, as Amar just said, to establish the subjective factor of the revolution. And that requires at some stage in the process, someone, whether it's 82 people or 10 or 15 people, taking the conscious decision to build an organization of the oppressed. But that on its own is insufficient. It's become absolutely clear throughout all of the experiences of revolutionary struggle that the movement you build has to have the correct ideological orientation. It has to be able to identify its enemies in struggle. It has to be able to identify its friends in struggle. It has to be absolutely honest about the state of its current capacities, about its power, about its weakness. And it has to develop a strategy to build power in a way that allows it ultimately to bring about the kinds of ideas that it has. And I think the significance of the conference in Lahore was precisely that it wasn't just an exchange of ideas. It wasn't just people flying in from different parts of the world and sharing their positions and their analyses on the international system, but it was a very precise intervention in ongoing political debates within Pakistan and within the global left more broadly, that seek to orient our forces in the construction of popular power so that when the revolutionary situation comes, we can be better equipped to respond. I think I'm out of time, so I'll stop there and I'll stay around a little bit if there are any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pavel. And I should have added that Pavel is today joining us from Moscow, where he is normally based. Next speaker will be Amina Wahid. And Amina is member of the executive committee of the Haqooq-e-Khalq party, the new party I was speaking of, and she was the head of the organization of the conference. So, Amina, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to International Manifesto Group and Comrade Radhika for holding this webinar, because yes, the conference itself was really important. It happened at a really important moment, but also extracting much out of it is what we all need, what we need to do going forward. And what HKP was aiming at by being co-host of this conference with Progressive International. So I think one was that HKP, Haqooq-e-Khalq party, we being the new and a very young leftist party in Pakistan. Pakistan is a country that always did, right after the independence, the left was there, but it operated on different levels, in different ways, with different set of ideas and strategies. And we, being a few years old, after especially the post-Gaza war, I think a lot changed around the world and for our party. We actively started thinking about how we planned on our strategies of solidarity politics to moving towards becoming a regional power, a regional party that can have a standing, which was one of the reasons why earlier this year, we became the part of the opposition alliance in the country. And that still doesn't mean that all fingers are pointed at state. I think we need to build our own base. We need to organize our party's first strong base is a working class area, Chungi, where some of the comrades could go. Pavel has visited the place. Our election base was also Chungi. Comrade Amar was our candidate, along with Comrade Muzammil Kakar, who is not from Punjab. He's from Balochistan, but that is what we believe in, that we bring in the diversity, but we have the same set of ideas and strategy for all over the country where we work. And which is why this conference for us was also important, that we need to build a new internationalist base as well, that looks at all these questions when we think of the Gaza war, when we think of our support for the groups that are fighting, when we think of Iran as a state, and how being, although very much coming under the crush of the liberal ideas, and how the regime operates, still it's one that is fighting the imperialist power. And yeah, so I think that the solidarity is built amongst those who are affected the most. And that is what we are aiming at. We are aiming to build this solidarity. We are aiming that Pakistan, who is also a country that is at forefront of these imperialist policies of IMF and World Bank, and day by day, our people, our working class, is being crushed under those very policies, under those very, economic crisis that we have to face. So to question that, to address that, we needed to bring all the thinkers of the anti-imperialist part and the agenda. And I think this was, it really went well. Along with that, this also gave us something more to look forward to. So now that we are part of this alliance, now that we are talking about these questions, we are also right now building up our own young cadres of political organizers who are young people. We are in alliance with People's Academy, and we are building up our chapters here, and we are holding political schools. So, and it's also because we do know that the documents like Lahore Declaration, they are not just theoretical interventions. They are something of grave importance. And we need to think on those very things and those very questions and reflect them into our groundwork, into our ground politics. So we need to learn, we need to look back at theory and how to apply that on our struggle on ground. And this document, Lahore Declaration, is also more of, we see it as a historical milestone for our politics as well. This will be remembered, this will be counted for the struggles that we are to do in future. And not just in Pakistan, it is for the global South. All the questions, the 10 points. And I'll also mention the idea of state. We see a Marxist definition of it. We see how many of the leftist groups internationally, the West, even in Pakistan, how they see the question of state, and how with the evolving time, the question of state also has evolved. We need to rethink on those very lines. So I think, yeah, I won't go too much into the details, but yeah, this is from my side. And I'm grateful to be a part of this webinar, and looking forward to answering any questions there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amina. That was great. And we will now go on to our next speaker. As I mentioned, Matteo Capasso has sent a recorded message. He's professor at Northwest University in China, specializing in the political economy and history of the Middle East. So let me just, I hope this is going to work. Where's his video? Here we go. video. Here we go. Share this, share sound, optimize for video sharing, share. And I hope everyone can see it, and I will start it.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm joining you from China with a recorded video due to the late time of the webinar. But I want to thank you, the comrades of the Haqooq-e-Khalq party, Pakistan, and the People's Academy for having organized this landmark conference in Lahore, and of course for the invitation from Professor Radhika Desai to take part in this report back webinar. I want to begin from a single line in the description of this webinar, that imperialism aggression, unrestrained by any law or morality, is matched only by its weakening abilities. I think that one sentence contains the whole problem in front of us, because at first it sounds like a contradiction. How can imperialism be more violent and weaker at the same time? We are trained to read violence as a sign of strength. What I want to argue instead in these few minutes is the opposite, that the violence we're watching is not the confidence of the system on the rise, but rather is the behavior of a system, of a structural system that has run out of other options. For most of its history, the unipolar order built by the US could rule partly, selectively, we could say, through consent, and more importantly, through a promise. The promise was integrate into our order, open up your economy, accept our conditions and terms, and you too will find development. That promise is now empty. The working masses of the global south can see more and more the emptiness at the core of this promise. What we see then replacing this promise, this empty promise, is a system that can no longer reproduce itself by building, and so reproduces itself by destroying. Kidnappings of presidents, like in Venezuela, thug diplomacy and sanctions, and most importantly, terroristic and genocidal violence are back on the table, full-fledgedly unleashed against those socio-political formations of the south of the world that are seeking an autonomous path to sovereignty and development. Much of this destruction is no longer even about profit in the old sense. It has become the management of decline, if we want, of a major structural crisis, a way of holding a crumbling order together by any means possible, thus force. The escalating war on the Arab-Iranian region, including, most importantly, most significantly, the genocide in Gaza, the destruction of South Lebanon, and now the assault on Iran, are the clearest cases. When a power can no longer secure a region through alliances, through the credible promise of development, through consent, it reaches for the only instrument it has left: force. Direct, brutal, genocidal force, outside any law, any moral, any legal boundary. This is what I have called elsewhere violent unilateralism, and it is not the opening move of a rising hegemon, as we know. It is the late behavior of a declining one, lashing out precisely because the cheaper tools of rule have stopped working. And Pakistan feels this directly. We've seen this with our own eyes in Lahore, with the discussions that today we're having. Pakistan sits at the very edge of the storm, like any other formation in the world, pulled now into a position of mediator between the United States and Iran. This position is not an accident. It is what happens to a country in the gravitational field of a crisis it did not create. So far, this might sound like good news. The empire is weakening, and surely its defeat will follow. But here, this is where I want to be careful, because this is exactly where I think we are most tempted to make our most dangerous mistake. A weakening empire is not a defeated empire. If anything, it is more dangerous on the way down. It is capable of enormous destruction, precisely because it feels that it has less to lose. And nothing in the structure of this crisis guarantees that what comes next will be better. The decline of an imperial order can produce many different futures. It can produce a weakened but reconfigured imperialism. It can produce new regional sub-imperialisms. It can produce fascism, we already are there. Or it can simply produce chaos, fragmentation, destruction of humanity, barbarism. But it can produce also something genuinely new. And this is where the example of the People's Republic of China matters a lot. For all of us, revolutionary masses of the South and of the North. For the first time in a very long time, there is concrete material proof that a country can develop outside the imperialist circuit, that hundreds of millions of people can be lifted out of poverty without surrendering to that old broken promise, that you can feed 20% of the world population with 8% of arable land in the world. So this fact is enormously important. It breaks the spell of famous slogan of Margaret Thatcher, there is no alternative. A more just world is no longer a slogan, it is becoming a fact. We can see an horizon, we are opening, there is an opening, a space of autonomy where we can maneuver, where countries can maneuver and decide what to do, which was not there at all under US-led imperialism. But, and this is the center of what I want to say, the existence of an alternative pole is not going to liberate by itself anyone. A multipolar world can give you space, but it does not tell you what to do with that space. And whether Pakistan or any other country of the world is going to become genuinely sovereign and develop fully is not decided in Beijing. And it's not going to be decided anymore in Washington. It is decided at home by the balance of forces inside each country. And that is why this conference, this party in Pakistan, matter far more than they might at first appear to. If the outcome were already decided, if the fall of imperialism automatically meant the rise of the people, then organization would be a luxury. We could simply wait it out. But the outcome is not predetermined. It is open. And when history is open, the decisive factor is the very one we're most tempted to forget. The organized strength, the clarity, and the mass base of ordinary people, of workers, of teachers, of nurses, of doctors, of peasants, workers. Pakistan's own history makes this vivid. This is a country that has been, in turn, ally of imperialism, a proxy, a victim of this, an opponent, and now is mediating between imperialism and what stands against imperialism, Islamic Republic of Iran. But it's not simply imperialism, as an instrument of imperialism. It has been not a victim either. Right now, we should see it as any other social formation in the world, as a terrain of struggle. Contradictory, contested, but up for grabs, genuinely up for grabs. And politics, organized movements that treats the state as purely an enemy or purely as a tool of the powerful will misread this moment. What the situation demands is a non-sectarian politics one that can unite working people across exactly the divisions that imperialism and its local partners depend on to keep us weak. This is a strategic necessity. It is the only way to actually intervene in a situation whose ending has not yet been written. So, let me end where I began. Imperialism is more violent and more weaker, both at once. And both things here are true. The weakness is real, but it ends us nothing. The violence is real, and it can still do terrible damage on its way out. Between those two facts lies the future, and it is genuinely undecided. The crisis has opened a door, but a door is only an opening. And what I saw in Lahore is that you can walk through that door once you decide to do it in an organized, clear manner, trying to root yourself among the people and the workers. And this is the work of a party like Haqooq. The decline of empire is not a victory. It is our opportunity, and it is up to us what we can make of this decline that is happening. Thank you so much, and I look forward to listen to all your contributions.
Thanks so much. That was a model of clarity, a model of what his compatriot Antonio Gramsci called optimism of the will and pessimism of the intellect. Thank you very much, Matteo. Now we will go to Zegam Abbas. Zegam Abbas is also a member of the executive committee of the Haqooq-e-Khalq party and was also chief organizer of the conference we were all at. So Zegam, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Radhika, for inviting me to the webinar. My comrade and friend Pavel talked about hope in his talk, and I would like to tell my comrades here that over the last 6 days, we are here in northern Pakistan, which is called Gilgit-Baltistan, and talking about the hope. My comrades from Haqooq-e-Khalq party, 4 of them, they traveled all the way from Lahore, got stuck on the way because of landsliding, stuck for 3 days in the mountains, but refused to go back and took another route to come to the elections to support a leftist political party here in Gilgit-Baltistan. And over the last 3 days, they have been engaged in a very good campaign, doing study circles with the young people, doing campaign mobilizations for our candidate who we are in alliance with. So this is the kind of hope that we have been sort of trying to cultivate through our politics. The speakers before me, especially Comrade Amarjan and Comrade Pavel, have laid a very good ground of how we understand the current crisis. I would also like to, sort of start by how we understand the current moment of crisis and why do we feel the need to have interventions like Lahore Conference and issue a declaration which, to say the least, has generated a lot of debate and also a lot of critique as well. I apologize if you don't see my picture right now because there is a problem of a power outage here as well. So it comes and goes in between, but I hope I am audible right now. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, so the first, is the question of how do we understand the current moment of crisis? The first is the question of the global South itself. Historically, we have seen that anti-war and anti-imperialist politics have been narrated through developments in the West. Whether we look at the war on Vietnam, the invasion of Iraq, or the struggle against apartheid, We see that the anti-war politics has gained visibility through mobilizations in the Western capitals. There was a kind of an implicit assumption that the most significant resistance to imperialism would emerge from within the imperial core itself. But I feel that the genocide in Gaza has shattered that assumption. We see that despite unprecedented destruction and open violation of international law, the Western politics has shown itself remarkably, sort of incapable of restraining the imperial violence. Millions of people have marched in solidarity with Palestine, yet we see that these mobilizations have had very little impact on the imperialist state policy. Gaza has exposed not only the brutality of contemporary imperialism, it has also exposed the growing inability of Western political institutions to generate an effective anti-imperialist response. This is why I feel that the moments like, Lahore conference was very important. What we attempted to do was to, sort of to shift the center of gravity of anti-imperialist politics. Instead of asking, how imperialism appears from the imperial core, what we tried to do was we tried to ask how imperialism is experienced from Lahore, and by extension, how it is experienced from the global South itself. In other words, we made an attempt to understand imperialism from the perspective of those who live with its consequences and who increasingly recognize the need to build independent political responses to it. So this was the first, sort of rationale that we, sort of envisaged while organizing the conference. The second was the intellectual necessity. For decades, much of the theoretical language through which the left understood the world was produced within Western universities and institutions. These traditions have generated important critiques of capitalism and empire. But the present moment, we feel that, the present moment has revealed some of their limitations. With the, sort of intensification of imperial violence, many intellectual currents associated with the Western academy have struggled to provide a coherent political response to the current crisis. And at the same time, some of the, sort of sharpest analysis of imperialism today are emerging from the sites of struggle themselves. We see this in the streets of Tehran. We see this in the camps of Gaza. We see it in the resistance movements of West Asia and in the social movements across the global South. We believe that, sort of these experiences have produced political languages that are often grounded in lived realities. They are generating new understandings of sovereignty and international solidarity. So one of, our key messages of the conference was that the future of anti-imperialist thought may increasingly, sort of shaped by those people who are confronting the imperialism directly, rather than by those who are studying it from the distance. So these are, two of the main rationales that we had in mind when we decided to hold the conference in a place like Lahore, because Lahore is not a different place from a city like Tehran, from a city like Sana'a, from a city like Beirut. So those were, a couple of rationales that we had in mind. I will stop here and limit my comments here, and I look forward to any questions, or, if we have time, we can have, some more minutes of intervention. Thank you, Dr. Radhika.
Thanks so much, Zaigam. That was another really clear and I think a very penetrating intervention. I think you folks in the HKP are really learning a lot of things on the ground, and that is apparent. We have two more speakers. Our next speaker is Professor Bikram Gill. He's Lecturer of Politics and International Relations at Cardiff University. Bikram, please go ahead.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Radhika. Just one moment. Okay, so I am not going to be as clear as the previous speakers. Just giving that heads up right away, because I have been working on something that we mentioned at the conference. I had mentioned that there's a paper that I had been working on with Helia, which has now turned into being part of a special roundtable on the Ramadan War, which will be coming out with Middle East Critique very soon. And we've kind of been writing and editing to deadline this weekend. So I have some maybe somewhat scattered thoughts that I'll be pulling from different places. But yeah, so I think I'm happy to share them right now because for similar reasons that Radhika mentioned, I think the conference had a pretty profound impact on me and what I think about anti-imperialism. And this question that for many years, as Amar had mentioned, that I also found to be very central is the question of sovereignty. So I wanted to begin just with some thoughts on sovereignty, and then how that kind of brings me into reflecting on my time in Pakistan in particular. So when we speak about sovereignty and sovereign development, for me, I will work with classic theorists of sovereignty like Jean Bodin and others, thinking about sovereignty operating on two levels, right? And when we think about two levels, there's an internal basis of sovereignty and there's an external set of relations. So to be a sovereign is to establish decision-making power over a clear territory. And that decision-making power isn't a power for power's sake. It's a decision-making power that decides how the resources of a territory are utilized to reproduce something. So I like to draw a distinction there between then a hard power basis of an internal hard power basis of sovereignty, which I call a quantitative basis, when you think about a realist kind of accounting of military power. But what it seeks to reproduce is a form of life within a territory that people have forged with one another and with land. So to defend something and reproduce something of significance, that can be a class set of relations. It can be a proletarian peasant basis. It can be cultural. It can be a range of things. They can be related. So there's an internal quantitative and qualitative basis that enforces decision-making power. But of course, there's an external level to sovereignty. And this is how sovereigns recognize one another across territories. So there's a recognition component where you may not recognize another sovereign as sovereign because it may violate either because you may feel threatened by that sovereign, or it may violate some principle that you uphold as quite vital, right? So when we think about, as the manifesto group talks about the movement to a pluripolar or a multipolar world, what does it mean to think about sovereign equality? How do you recognize across difference, across territory? Now that's very interesting, right? Because to be sovereign is to think about who we are, right? How we identify, what we seek to reproduce. But in our relations of difference, it also changes who we are. As we recognize one another across difference and across territory, the story of humanity is not simply place and stasis, it's also movement and exchange, right? And so this happens between sovereigns and across sovereigns. It can happen through force again. There can be a quantitative component where a sovereign forces another sovereign to recognize into recognition or into subjugation, but it can happen through other forms of more qualitative forms of exchange, through mutual learning, through mutual growth, right? Through cultural exchange, through economic exchange. So that's the kind of a framework I just wanted to put out there because I think it'll apply to my experience at the conference in multiple ways. So, as I'm thinking about sovereignty as a primary question confronting peoples of the South and the contradiction with imperialism, so I'm invited to this conference. Amar sends me a note beforehand, and I'm very excited to go to work with the party, to meet other anti-imperialists there. But of course, like for Radhika, there's even a more personal reason for me to go visit Pakistan. So, when I'm talking about sovereignty, internal, external, I'm also trying to figure out how do I locate myself going to Pakistan? Because on the one hand, it feels like that external relation going from north to south or from Indian heritage to visiting Pakistan, and thinking about, okay, is this a question of external relations, of mutual recognition, mutual learning? But there's another part of the story for me is, of course, the partition in 1947, one half of my family was forced to leave Pakistan in 1947, and my grandparents were forced to leave in quite a bit of a hurry. And I never got to know my grandparents. I don't have any recollection. My grandfather died very young, soon after partition. So, when I'm invited, a part of me is also wanting to be the first person in the family to go back to find to find our ancestral village and so on. And like this quote I have from Walter Benjamin, I put it up very often. It was running through my mind a lot. He talks about the angel of history wanting to stay and make whole what has been smashed. That history moves through progress, but there's always debris piling up. The movement forward of history has debris, and the angel of history mourns that debris and would like to make it whole. And we feel that in our families, what's been smashed and torn apart. And I know my mother's family never recovered from partition. I know, like I said, I never got to know my grandparents, and her family fractured quite profoundly, and was never really. And they ended up in large measure going to Canada, working in working class jobs, etc. So for me, like traveling there was really important, and I put that forward because I wonder that Benjamin quote, what that means for us as we think about addressing imperialism today, building sovereignty. What does it mean in terms of making these histories whole again, or making whole what has been smashed? Because as I come to Pakistan from the north to the south, coming in this relation to mutual learning, it also feels like something internal was fractured, right? Because I come to Lahore, and maybe it's naive on my part, or it's a reflection of me being raised in the global north, but I come to Lahore and I'm really struck by how we are the same people. And Radhika, your point about cousins, when I met Ahmad, and I met other cadre and workers in the party. I'm definitely like Haris and others. I'm feeling like these are my cousins, literally hearing that they're from very similar backgrounds. So, that was, I think, something that you felt like there was, when we think about that internal basis of what is to be defended and reproduced, well, something was broken and fissured and fractured. But to come and see that in many ways we continue to be one people, right? We continue to come from a history, and there could be a promise of some, whether it's external or internal or whatever, of some form of unification in the fight against imperialism. And I'm really grateful that the party really helped me find the village my mom was from and find the house she was from, and to be able to visit the village. And to be able to, be welcomed by the villagers and saying, you like, hearing about my grandparents and my great grandparents, finding the trees they planted, being able to walk through the homes. It was a very meaningful experience for me. I can tell you, when I shared that with my mother, I don't think I've spoken with Ahmad and Amina and others. I've never seen my mom smile like that in years. I've never seen her actually get that excited about anything as I saw. So, I think. To me, that's a key part of coming back to, I think, on a personal level, the sovereignty question. Now, one thing I also saw as I traveled to the village, as the party team accompanied me, Helia also comes with me, and I'll leave this more for her to say, is the embrace that she receives as being from Iran, right? And I think I'm only going to mention that. I'll let her say more about this if she would like, but it was quite profound because people were coming out in the alleys of the villages, just really, really so saying thank you to Iran and really excited. And this is a really interesting point, because what does it mean that people in the villages of Pakistan are cognizant of what Iran's stand against US imperialism means for them? I wondered about this question when I witnessed this. But then I shouldn't have been so puzzled, because of course Pakistan has also been on the front lines, maybe of working with US imperialism, but also bearing the costs of it in the war on terror, in the drone strikes, in the violence that has unsettled Pakistan. And now you're seeing a state actually take a stand and against this lawless war on terror, right? This kind of the way that it projected violence with impunity. Now you're seeing a form of accountability imposed upon this. And you could see where you may think, well, do villagers care? If people think, do everyday people care about foreign policy? Do they care about these sorts of things? Well, you see, why would they? They would care because sovereign power is the condition also for how you do address class questions, how you do address land questions, right? So I think that was very clear. And then I think something else I learned in relation to this in discussions with the party there, something that really struck me, I think has been mentioned by a couple of speakers, is how much Gaza and the Ramadan war has changed the political landscape in Pakistan, and maybe across like the Islamic world, but maybe across the global South in many ways. And what I heard was like, how the Gaza war was experienced in Pakistan in relation to the war with India, in seeing the comments coming out of India saying we need to do to Pakistan what Israel had done to Gaza. right? And maybe understanding if there are some elements of saying, well, US power may be declining, but it's dangerous. But at the same time, I think it also shows an understanding of the limits of US power. Can you rely on, in Pakistan, in a political struggle, understanding what's at stake, seeing what's happened in the frontier provinces for years? Okay, so I'm wrapping it up. So yeah, I think that's one thing that I saw very that struck me very strongly was the impacts of Gaza and the Ramadan war. And then I think maybe the last couple of points I'll make very quickly, and if we have time, we can come to it in discussion. Is I was really heartened to see an opening of a left party, and of course, you know, the relationship between left and Islamist or political Islamic parties have been fraught in both directions. But to see a party that was open to revisiting those questions, not in a rigid sense, to say one cannot keep having this I guess, I don't know, the combativeness that has existed, you know, an openness to engage the substance of sovereignty on an internal basis, the openness to revisit the questions of the relationship between left and Islam. It goes back to this question of the relations of mutual learning that we're talking about today, as we witness the axis of resistance, as we try to take seriously and engage their epistemological basis and their material basis. I saw the party open to putting this in motion. And I'll end with the point on the state then, is I think this matters for how we conceive the state, right? Because all I would urge people to think about, those who have come to think about the state in more hostile or skeptical terms, which you should always, but the state is never a generic state. There's not a singular state that exists. There's a content and a structure of the state that can shape a state differently. So I think like for maybe Islamic-oriented forces, they can learn from a left program about how a state structured on a universal economic basis can secure sovereignty in a very different way than a state that's structured on the denial of land reform or the protection of bourgeois forces. And then I think left forces can also learn what it means to take seriously, you know, more, I don't know, theological and cultural forms of life that might underpin a popular will that would defend the sovereignty of the state. So thank you for the time, and I'm done there. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Bikram. I think that was really, really very important to say, not just touching, but I think really strategically important as well. In fact, I'm going to come to our next speaker in a minute, but what Bikram said just reminded me that the conference issued the Lahore Declaration, but let me also put forward to you my Lahore thesis, because nowhere have I felt it. It was only in that context of all those discussions that took place both within the conference and around the conference that I have concluded, and I guess I'll have to write a book about supporting this thesis, but the enemy of South Asia, the cause of all its miseries, or overwhelming majority of its miseries, is Brahmanism. Roughly translated, it is upper caste superiority. I'll explain in my book, but for now, forthcoming book, yet to be written, but for now, let me go to our next and final speaker, Helia Dutahi. Helia is a scholar of international law and political economy at the University of Tehran. And for reasons that Bikram and many others have underlined, she was absolutely the star turn at our conference. So Helia, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Radhika and everyone. It is so wonderful to see all the comrades. I miss you all dearly, and I really hope that we all reconvene in Tehran, hopefully very soon. I'm actually glad that I'm going after Bikram, because with a lot of brilliant political analysis that help us understand and situate ourselves within this moment, then I can, which is the hard part of doing this, I can do the easy part, and I really want to, and since I'm the last person, I want to, I guess, end on a more personal reflection on my experience as in the conference. You all know I was in Iran, and I traveled to Pakistan to join our comrades at the conference after the war of aggression, which is still ongoing. Some people are just pretending there's a ceasefire. There is not. The south of Iran is still, engaged very much, and so is Lebanon. And so, yeah, I traveled after, I guess, the airlines reopened, and I was able to go to Turkey, and then through that join comrades in Lahore. And I was expecting, political discussions, strategic debates, expressions of solidarity, of course, and I found all of them. But what I guess it was more than I was thinking I would receive, given my experience attending a lot of conferences in the West, was the historical recognition and the profound kindness and deep solidarity that I received and I felt when I was there. And what has struck me throughout my time in Pakistan, as Bikram as well explained, was how little effort was required to establish the common ground that we all felt. In much of West, we are taught to imagine that culture is a barrier. Language, religion, our different religions, our nationalities, our ethnicity, geography are all presented as markers separating people into like different, groups and worlds. And yet, the experience in Pakistan was quite different. And I think I speak for all of us when I say this. The warmth I encountered, the camaraderie, and that like very immediately forged and was felt amongst everyone, and the sense of shared purpose that animated countless conversations felt less like the creation of a new relationship and more, I want to say, like rediscovery of old ones, And perhaps, as again Bikram said, it shouldn't have been surprising, because when I was again thinking about it when I came home, it was the same forces in MI6 that overthrew Mossadegh that also separated, Punjab, Pakistan. And the people and ancestors of the South have spent generations confronting many of the same colonial forces, right? And so we have endured colonial domination, economic extractions, occupations, bombardment, political interference, and the continual denial of our sovereignty. And so our histories, while distinct, but the colonial structures imposed upon us have often been remarkably similar. And so we recognize one another, not because our cultures are identical or similar as Iranis and Pakistanis and what have you, but because our historical experiences have been shaped by related forms of domination and struggles, and so are struggles in anti-colonial, anti-imperial struggles that we're waging. So at its deepest level, I think this is all what we experience in Pakistan is also what we should be thinking about when we talk about multipolarity. Multipolarity represents the reemergence of relationships that colonialism sought to fragment. And we know, as others also explained with great clarity, that anti-colonial movements of the 20th century, people across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and West Asia, discovered one another through common struggles against empire. And Pakistan was an invitation and allowed us to do this exactly. And again, what has struck me immediately also was the clarity with which ordinary people, as we were walking in Bazaar, not only at the conference, but ordinary people had the clarity that they had about Iran specifically. And for someone who has spent, much of my life in the West, this was deeply moving, because as an Irani woman and a visibly Muslim woman, I have found myself being interpreted by that Islamophobic lens when I attend conferences in the West. I'm perceived as this. So even in progressive spaces, I still have to explain the repression against Irani women, why I'm wearing this hijab, how it is not, all of this, right? And it was so deeply different, my experience in Pakistan, because people allowed Muslim societies and us to really, what I'm trying to say is that people recognize the liberation movements emerge from the concrete histories of the people that are waging those struggles. There was an understanding that anti-colonial struggles develop through their own political, cultural, intellectual, and spiritual tradition. And these were there was appreciation that the political life of the Muslim world cannot be reduced to concepts that are derived from Western Marxism or Eurocentric views. And most importantly, there was a space for contradiction and complexity. Our Pakistani comrades understood Iran's role within the wider anti-imperialist struggle while simultaneously allowing me as the Iranian participant to talk about our internal contradictions in Iran in a way that I would be certain and not worried about that being hijacked for any imperialist agenda or justifying imperialist aggression against Iran, right? They understood that supporting Iran against imperialist aggression does not require pretending that Iran is like free of class contradiction or any contradiction for that matter, and or social tension or political shortcoming. They grasp something that many in the West fail to do so, and that is a society subjected to more than 4 decades of sanctions, sabotage, assassinations, warfare, and media warfare will inevitably contain contradictions. And the existence of such contradictions does not negate the reality of a sovereign and anti-imperialist project. The measure of a revolutionary process is not its perfection. The measure is whether it continues to expand the capacity of its people to defend its sovereignty, to deepen development, indigenous development, and a struggle towards greater forms for justice under conditions designed to make such achievements impossible, right? So, yet, what moved me most was not even what happened in the conference and the clarity, although, obviously we were all inspired by it. As Bikram was saying, and I want to touch upon this, in the afternoon, I'll share this and I'll go to our village experience. All of us were in Bazaar trying to get souvenir for our loved ones when we go back from Pakistan. And, Bikram and I entered this shop, and the guy seems very excited to learn about the fact that I'm Irani, and Bikram ends up getting a free gift from him. I don't know why him and not me, but somehow he didn't let us pay for the scarf that we got. And later, traveling to the village, what I experienced something was really profound, and I did not speak their language, and they did not speak mine in the village, and yet I felt understood in a way that I never have. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. As someone who has spent, again, much of my life in the West, as a young woman when I didn't have my political education yet, I always strive to, speak the language, not have accent, try to assimilate, and somehow I felt as a young woman, if I did speak the language, if I looked like them, if I didn't, have a broken grammar, I would be accepted and I would be loved and I would feel I belonged. And here, in the village, surrounded by people whose language I could not speak at all, I felt more home than in many places I have been in the West, and I lived for years. And in places that I ended up speaking flawlessly. The villagers wanted me to know that they saw me like their daughter. And what happened when we were leaving the village, one of the elders approached me and gave me some money. And I thanked them and I appreciate them, and I sat in the car, and our comrades who were accompanying me told me that this is a tradition when daughters return home to visit family. The fathers give them money, and they really wanted us to tell you that that's how they receive and see you, like their daughters. And this is a moment that, to this day, every time that I talk about it and I remember it, it deeply touches me, because entire industries in the West are dedicated in convincing us that the civilizations are distant to clash, that the cultural differences, are made to be overcome and for us to be like each other. And the societies of the global South remain strangers to one another unless mediated through Western institutions, the program and like the programs of the UN or the NGOs interventions to bring us closer to one another. And yet, we didn't need any of this. We didn't even need to speak each other's language to feel the struggle we're in, to love each other the way we did, and to receive each other, and to show appreciation and solidarity for one another. So I'll end with this. I think what I saw in Lahore and our fantastic comrades who organized this, and this was, I think, one of the most hopeful development that I felt, was that it was not only about fighting against imperialism, because I think what we experience and what it's starting to be built is the story building in is not against imperialism, but in a spite imperialism. And soon, inshallah, we will be building instead of imperialism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helia. That was fantastic. And I think, as I expected, and I just wanted to say that you are reminding us that if the big task we face today is to build solidarity among the peoples of the developing world, the third world, etc., that task is not going to be that difficult. Thank you very much for reminding us of that. Okay, that was our final speaker. There is now time for questions and answers. I see, Yuri, you have your hand up, and that's great. I'm just going to give people a couple of moments to think about it. Meanwhile, let me just tell you about our next webinar, which will be on Sunday, the 21st of June, 2026. It is entitled Imperialism versus Multipolarity, US and China's Clashing Visions of the International Order. It will be jointly organized with the International Manifesto Group. Sorry, it will be jointly organized by Friends of Socialist China and International Manifesto Group. So please keep your eyes open for that. Okay, and if you have questions, please use the raise hand function, which at least on my screen, I find under the react button. If you click it, you will see a number of options, one of which is raise hand. So that way, because if you just do this, I may not see you, but if you use that facility, then I will see you. Okay, Yuri, please go ahead. Oh, and I will ask you. Yeah, okay, you're unmuted. Wonderful.
Thank you, Professor, and and thank you to all of the wonderful speakers. It was fantastic. My question is this, and we might actually have to do an entire international manifesto group on just this topic alone, so here goes. My question to members of the HEK party is, firstly, do you think it's long overdue that the Western left, but even the global left, stop practicing anti-communist leftism? And which current or past model of a communist state do you think would be perfect for Pakistan? And do a lot of you see the limitations of BRICS and the efforts at multipolarity given Pakistani-Indian relations? I know it's been difficult for Pakistan to engage with BRICS, particularly India, given the past Indian Congress governments, and certainly under the Modi BJP is very Islamophobic and hostile to Pakistan, even when I believe under Imran Khan, he did try to engage in détente. And then another question I have is, historically, how does the HEK and other Pakistani leftists view Indian partition? I'm very curious. And the first leader of Pakistan, Mohammed Jinnah, and his socio-economic legacy. And then very curious, how is Imran Khan doing? And does he and his party critically engage with the PEK and their relations compared to the Pakistani People's Party and the Muslim League? Thank you.
Okay, that's excellent. If there are no further questions, then I would like to request all the speakers to respond to any or all of the points raised by Yuri. And I would also like at the end to respond to at least one of the things he said. So I think we'll go in the same order as we had, except that I will go at the end. And if there are no further questions at the end of this round, we can finish the webinar. But if there are further questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Now, I know Pavel's had to leave, so he won't be there, but we will go otherwise in the order in which we started. So, Amar, would you like to react?
Sure. And thank you, Yuri, for that question. As far as the left in the West is concerned, I think one of the things that are like absolutely essential from the global majority's perspective is a very strong anti-imperialist politics in the imperial core. That is what would matter a lot. I mean, of course, we're all for like free buses, good wages. We connect with working class people in Belgium, in London, in the US. But you cannot have a system where you have some kind of welfare and protections for the working classes in the imperial core, which is subsidized by imperial wars that are causing immense destruction. I mean, even if you take out the moral part of it, in the long run, it's unsustainable because the immigrant crisis is partly a result, at least in Europe, it's partly a result of this massive destruction of West Asia that's happened over the past 25 years. I mean, remember, there were no Asian immigrants in Europe in the 17th century. And the reason is this is prior to imperialism. So defeating imperialism is essential for defeating the far right fascistic forces in the imperial core. And I think that's one place where we feel that a lot of people in the West, in the Western left, feel that this is one issue that can be bracketed at times for the greater cause, for building a coalition. So, free buses versus like opposing genocide in Gaza. I mean, that's a false choice. It's a terrible choice. And it's a choice that's unsustainable strategically, politically in the long run, because it will fuel the far right, which will take away the very little gains that you've made out of these massive, massive moral compromises. So that's one part on the global left. In terms of Pakistan, here you had 2-3 different questions, and I'll try answering at least one or two of them. In terms of China, you see, Pakistan has a very different relationship with China as compared to what we've had with the US. And that's something we reiterate again and again and again. China is Pakistan's largest creditor right now. So that would imply that, maybe there could be an imperialist relation. And there are all these like liberals and even some leftists, backed, of course, generously by US aid, that claim that this is an imperialist relationship now. But it's a fundamental misreading of what's actually happening. Because if you look at what the US did with with the credit that's given to us, it has imposed austerity, it imposed neoliberal politics, it imposed the free market, it used the IMF to create, our budgets today are created and approved by IMF officials. Then it imposed sanctions on us in the past. It threatens us with military military pressure. We were the target of the drone strikes. Pakistan was the laboratory of drone strikes. The US built military bases all across our region. China has done none of that. It is not demanding that we have socialism or the free market or any of that. It is not threatening us with military annihilation. It is not, making our budgets for us. So that opens up a vast world of opportunities. And the fact that our ruling classes again and again fail to take advantage of those opportunities is an internal failure. And, and if someone else could probably talk about the relations with India. So I'll just say one final thing about the founding father. That's a vexed question in Pakistani history. There are all those who oppose him, and these tendency within nationalist leaders. These are very, very contradictory figures, almost all of them, throughout the post-colonial world. Because at one level, they were asserting the sovereignty of their country against foreign domination. At another level, the class composition of their coalitions was such that it was geared towards compromise. However, what's interesting is that the Communist Party of India supported the Muslim League because it feared what Radhika was saying earlier, the rise of Brahmanism, and it feared that the violence that would be unleashed against the Muslim minority can only be checked if you have some sovereign states with the capacity to put some fear of God in the Brahmanical elites. So that there's an entire thesis. The Soviet Union supported it. It's called the Adhikari thesis. If you're interested, I can send you more work on this. And the manifesto of the Muslim League, the party led by the founder, which contested the 1946 elections, the manifesto was written by a communist called Dania Latifi. So it talked about land reforms, it talked about nationalization of industries. Jinnah himself used the term Islamic socialism at one point. So there's that kind of contradictory history that is very much part of, and the tendency on the left is to at times completely throw out that entire history. And I think that's a big mistake. I think it's way better to see the nationalist movements as part of our heritage. And Hellier talked about traditions. I think it's very important to not throw everything out. We are very much part of the broader anti-colonial currents that included, Indian leaders, that included Pakistani leaders, that included other leaders from the global south, and we can improve upon them. But to say that that was an entirely entire chapter written in false consciousness, I think it would be not just a mistake theoretically, it would also be a mistake politically, because it will disarm us in trying to build a narrative today, because it is very much a narrative of betrayal, that Pakistan was betrayed by the elites. The reason why people voted in 1946 for Pakistan, the reason why communists supported Pakistan, the reason why the Soviet Union supported Pakistan was so that it could become a welfare state for the people, it could become a free land. And that's the tradition we are holding on to. And that the question of memory is very important. We must never forget. In a moment of universal forgetfulness, remembering is a revolutionary act, and that impulse that guided my grandparents to fight for Pakistan, I hold very dear to my heart. And I very much see myself trying to fulfill Pakistan's destiny, which is a free, socialist, anti-imperialist country that can be a defender not only of its own people, but of West Asia, of Gaza, and of the entire region. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amar. I forgot to mention earlier, as I meant to, that you should also feel free to comment on any other speaker that has spoken. So if you want to comment now, I will let you, or if you want to come back later, I will let you. So what would you like to do? Okay, you didn't understand what I was saying, but feel free to comment on the other speakers. If you think of something to say later, please come back. Okay, so we will now go to Amina. Now, Amina, you had said that you missed Yuri's questions. Yuri, might I ask you to very briefly summarize your questions for Amina, because she didn't hear it because of a bad connection.
Yeah, I have them in my chat box now.
Oh, okay, very good. Very
Yeah.
good. Perfect.
So I'll also kind of talk about the idea of partition, because that's where sometimes, especially I am from Punjab, and we are really hit by the whole idea of partition every time we think of it. And I'll say that with time, when the realities and the political scenarios shift, we realize things more deeply with changing times. So at first, of course, we always didn't really like the idea of partition. Being a student of political science and studying the history, and I always said that partition in reality took place in Punjab and Bengal. It was Punjab that was ripped apart. I wouldn't even say divided into two. I would say it was ripped. And the same happened to Bengal. But now, in the current times, when we see the governments and the I think people like Modi leading nations and how they, put forward their fascist tendencies very clearly. I think that is the time we look back and we think of what leaders like Jinnah were talking about. And wouldn't say that still that partition doesn't ache, because being a Punjabi, being from Lahore, I also have some friends in India. We always talk about, we are just a few miles from each other's homes, but the border doesn't allow us to even see each other. So I think, but having a political grounding of the left, I do consider Bhagat Singh as my leader. I do consider people like him who laid the foundations of resistance in this land. And I would also say that Modi and these very people like Modi, are the outcome, they are the product of the imperialist and colonial policies that were imposed on this piece of land. I wouldn't say the culture didn't exist before. The culture was there, the differences were there, the religious differences were there, all of it being there, the two nations lived together. And the time British came and imposed their colonial rule over our lands, our people, at that time, even the Indian Punjab side people were my people too. And now we are divided. Now we have to find ways to even, see how we can meet and be in the same room. And with all of, I blame nothing more than the British colonial time, the imperialist regime like US, and how the influence, you have to also see that how the US has its influence on India and on Pakistan at the same time, and having these two countries at war. It serves the US, it serves the imperialist, I think, country that it is, and the policies. And if you look at Pakistanis, the common people of Pakistan, when it comes to China and US, they do not see China as a threat. Let's just not think of how well-read we are or how political we are. Let's talk about the common people. They see US as the threat. They see US as the bigger enemy always. I once happened to ask one of the people, they were in the staff at a university. And I asked them, how do you understand the US influence? They said that every time the money price goes up, it's always compared to dollar. It is the US dollar that we have to look up to. And it is them who are imposing all those policies on our state institutions as well, and the privatization as well. So this much understanding is there. So that's how the people see. And China, they don't see as a threat. They don't see, because it is not, to be very honest. So yeah.
Lovely, Amina, thank you. Again, you are putting our feet on the Pakistani ground, which is really marvelous. Now, obviously, Matteo is not here, so we will go next to Zaigam, then Bikram, then Helie, and then, as I said, I want to say a couple of things. So, Zaigam,
Comrade
please go.
Zaigam isn't here. He messaged me. He wanted to apologize. He couldn't
Okay,
be.
no
Yeah.
worries. In that
Had to leave.
case, we will go to Bikram, Helie, and then me. Thanks.
I think I wanted to just maybe think about some of the questions around like the Western left, but also I think around this question of BRICS and Hindutva, Islamophobia, etc. I mean, I guess in the question, those are a lot of questions, by the way, too. Like that's like a whole slew of questions. I was trying to get them down. So I think like this question of what a perfect communist party or a communist party would look like. I would want to start with that question, because I think for anti-imperialists today, I do think fundamentally that there is no sovereign program that can be developed independent of a socialist program. This is true. But I do not think it's the case that we must hold that every expression of sovereignty must take the form of how we understand communism to be. So if that makes sense, right? So there's a state on the periphery simply for reasons that, Samir Amin, Radhika in her work, others have emphasized, the periphery doesn't have access to colonies in the same way, so it cannot offset the irrationalities of capitalism with colonialism or imperial peripheries. So therefore, you need a much more rational economic program, and things like nationalization, social ownership and management of key industries of the commanding heights, those are essential, right? So whether or not you identify as a socialist or not, the socialist policy framework is quite essential, is one thing that I think is very key. What I would say though about more generally though is something else that's really, I think, pivotal is, and I'm going to reference actually a talk Radhika gave while we were in Pakistan, and I commented on your talk there, Radhika, is, the failure of the Indian state, which is, I think, opens up this question of what is BRICS, right? What is actually the world to come, right? Because again, it goes back to my point, there's not necessarily a generic state. The state is structured on distinct political economic structures. And the point I'm coming to is the way India does not succeed in structuring its state and political economic project on a broader universal economic basis that can contest landlord power or that middle caste power in a serious way, right? So that makes it and Frantz Fanon would say the class basis or the universal economic basis of national development will determine the states on the periphery's relationship to imperialism. And so the way India is not able to break out of and achieve a form of sovereign development because of the way it doesn't address the land question, I think that's a really important historical fact that has to be censured. And we saw that in Pakistan. So one thing that's very impressive about the party is the party has workers and cadre from Balochistan, as we saw, to Gilgit-Baltistan, right? Like you have this really kind of understanding of Pakistan as a whole and the necessity of engaging the universal basis of the Pakistani state to defend its sovereignty. But that will pose the question of the reproduction of Pakistan as a whole. And how does that bring to the foreground again the land question? Now, that's not going to reappear in the same way in every moment, right? But it is going to mean the need to construct a universal economic program, a universal basis to political and economic development. I think that is the distinction between India and China today, right? So if we want to think about the BRICS, or I know Radhika, you recently spoke about RICS or something like this, Russia, India, China. I think how these emergent states are structuring themselves, restructuring themselves, or as Helia really put it really well, maybe we don't demand perfection, but what sort of room for growth is there? In what directions? I think those are some key questions that are put forward that can come back to something that I was saying, right? As we think about the movement towards sovereign equality or plurality, there's going to be projects of mutual learning, right? What the Black Panthers might have called each one teach one, learning from one another, that I think brings us back to questions of the relationship between class and nation and land and resources. So I think that's what I would say about that.
Lovely, thank you. Just a quick clarification. Yes, I spoke about RICS, Russia, India, China. That's an old trope. But I was saying that the old RICS should be replaced by a new RICS, Russia, Iran, China. That's another story altogether. But we will now go to Helia. Helia, please go ahead.
I think she's saying she's having internet issues.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Okay, Helia, we will wait. Let me then make my intervention, and hopefully Helia will get her internet back by the time I'm done. So I actually just wanted to say maybe two things. Number one, I agree with Bikram, on one very key point that he made, which is that today, if we are going to have any kind of assertion of sovereignty, which is essentially the assertion of the right to develop, I really don't think you can separate sovereignty from development. Sovereignty isn't about language, culture, defending your borders, singing brave patriotic songs. It's not about that. It's about development. It's about creating productive capacity in your country, which is the backbone of your military ability to defend yourself, should that be necessary. Hopefully that would not be necessary, but without that, you can't do anything, no matter how brave you are, no matter how passionate you are. etc. And the reason for that, the reason why socialism is necessary, is because today, to develop all the countries of the developing world, the third world, is a uphill task. It has no, I mean, the experience of development of Western countries has no relevance for it. Why? Because, and these are the 4 points I made in Lahore, and I'm going to make them quickly again. Number one, first world countries, when they developed on the back of imperialism. They could not have developed without imperialism in the way that they did. Number two, so countries that wish to develop today have to develop in the teeth of imperialist resistance. Number three, they have to develop from a point where they have been lowered by imperialism, so that they have a steeper hill to climb, a bigger hill to climb. And number four, they have to develop without having the luxury of exporting surplus populations to allegedly empty continents. So all of these reasons are there. This is going to make the development of third world countries very different. And what socialism means is that you have the political capacity to organize this kind of development, because without really having the people behind you, which is what socialism implies, that you really need to mobilize people behind, you are not going to be able to accomplish this task, which is why today China's development is so far ahead of all the other BRICS. That's just one thing. The other BRIC issue is that, yeah, I mean, especially India is very problematic from the point of view of the BRICS. India under Modi is. But I really wanted to say something about the point that Yuri asked, and several other people have mentioned it. Amina, Amar have said wonderful things about partition, but I just wanted to add my 2 bits worth. Earlier, when I said that, I'm going to call the sharp realization that I got amid all the discussions in Lahore, my Lahore thesis, is the following, that the enemy of South Asia, and remember, when we are talking about South Asia, we're talking about 2 billion people. I'm talking about all the peoples of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. The enemy, their common enemy, is Brahmanism, or translated roughly into English as upper caste privilege. Why do I say that? Because it caused the partition, and it continues to poison the relations between peoples who are otherwise have such fraternal relationships. They're culturally, linguistically, in so many ways the same. We are the same people, no matter how many other differences we may have. So what do I mean by that? The partition was caused not because Jinnah demanded partition. Jinnah was a leader who understood that thanks to the rise of a certain type of aggressive Brahmanism under colonialism, that Muslim majority parts of the subcontinent would need a lot of autonomy. What he asked for was not partition. He asked for a loose federation in which the federated units, namely the states, as we call them in South Asia, the states or provinces, would have a lot of power. The central government, by contrast, would have less power. That's what he wanted, but that is what Congress and its leaders, and I'm including Gandhi here, no matter how much he did during the time when the partition riots were taking place, the fact is that he did not concede this. And the reason they did not concede it is equally important, because conceding this would have taken power away from the Brahmanical national leadership and put it in the hands of the middle caste. I'm not even talking about ordinary people, but the middle caste, what we may call dominant caste. It's a complex concept, but I won't go into here. But middle caste peoples who basically control land in most parts of India. It would have given them the power, but they are the backbone. They are essentially, if I may translate it roughly into Western terms, they are the yeomanry of India. And these are the people who would have got power, not the 3 upper castes who are a tiny sliver of the Indian population, whereas these middle castes constitute a very big fat middle of the Indian population structure. So they did not wish to give them power. And one final point today, 2 final points, 2 more points. If India had not been partitioned, people do not realize this, it would have been the largest Muslim country in the world. And that would have had 2 very big effects. Number one, Hindutva would not be possible in a country where roughly 40% of the population was Muslim, because that's what it would have been. There would have been no space for Hindutva. And that would have meant all of us would be better off. But number two, India's foreign policy vis-a-vis all of these things that have happened in West Asia would have had to be completely different, because India would have been the representative of its Muslim populations as well as its Hindu population. And it would have been, therefore, I mean, many of the atrocities perhaps that have taken place would not have been possible. Remember, if there had been no partition, it was not Pakistan today shares a border with Iran, but all of India would have shared a border with Iran, etc. So, I mean, I think this is these things are worth underlining. Now, I'm done. I'm hoping that Helie has managed to regain her internet connection. Helie, are you there? And if you are, please respond to your co-panelists as well as Yuri's questions. Bikram, you had something to say?
Well, I'll wait to see if Helie is there, but I don't think she is. I don't think she's going to be able to respond. I think her connection is quite choppy. I wanted to just actually maybe just mention one point that addresses another question. Part of Yuri's stable of questions is the I think there's a point on the Western left that was asked, and I wanted to draw attention to a documentary series that Helie has been producing, and it's called Still Minab. It's about the strike on the school in Minab on the first day of the escalation of the aggression on February 28th, and episode 4 has just been released. And in this episode, towards the end, Helie engages in a quite explicit, I think, contrast perhaps, but it's also a calling to account of sorts of the Western left in the face of witnessing a live stream genocide. And there's like images that are being that are there in in that episode as well that show this contrast, right, between what we see in Iran, in Minab, this commitment to be ready to sacrifice for your country, your people, your nation, and yet contrasting that with the real inability to actually hold that sort of politics in the West. And I think that's I really urge everyone to watch the entire series and especially reflect on episode 4 and the ending there, right? Because I think on this question of the Western left, I think that puts it really front and center. Because many of us experienced this in 2024, especially, right? We experienced having our whole lives stopped and upended, encountering day in and day out. But what was missing was the political form, the political histories that would have allowed us to come together in a kind of understanding of sacrifice, of working for principle, to be able to forge these relations, as we're seeing in Gaza and Lebanon, in Iran, right? You see a real absence of that in those spaces. And I think that question is put forward very starkly in episode 4. So I just wanted to really encourage folks to check that out.
Thanks, Bikram. Please share the link to those videos in the chat, please, so that people can find them. Jeffrey, if you have a quick question, I guess we'll take one since we only had one question from the floor. So please go ahead, and whoever remains will respond to your question.
Thank you. I feel very fortunate to get my quick question in, and it's perfect timing off of what Bikram just said about the Western left. So I'm living here in the imperial core in New England, from where the original CIA emanated. So what I've been trying to do is emphasize in my contacts an anti-imperial view primarily. But I really resonate with what everybody is saying. This is really a masterclass, because it still seems slightly taboo to talk about the crimes of the CIA here in the imperial core. And there's a number of there's fearful reactions to it, and then there's just the sheer cognitive dissonance of not wanting to understand the cause and effect between our relative prosperity here and the genocidal immiseration of the global majority. And I keep chipping away at it. I think a few people are starting to understand the scope and scale. For example, many more Americans now than 10 years ago know about what Helye was referring to when she said the MI6 overthrowing Mossadegh. It was the MI6's idea, but there was the CIA on the ground to actually do it because Mossadegh had kicked the British out. It didn't. I'm just looking to see if that's the anti-imperial, keep hammering at the CIA is a decent strategy to counteract the blinders of the Western left.
Great, thank you. Does anybody want to respond to that? Please jump in. Okay, I mean, I guess maybe I will respond on behalf of the panel, and maybe if they think of anything else to say. But I mean, of course, there's absolutely no doubt that exposing these crimes of the Western intelligence agencies, armies, etc., is absolutely critical to the critique of imperialism. The only thing I'd add to that is that, of course, while that is important, it is not enough. You have to criticize the whole, all the different aspects of the way imperialism works. But absolutely, I think that that's great. So thank you for that point. Bikram has shared the link to the documentaries Helye has been making. Having said that, I just want to end. I think we should wrap up this meeting. I just want to end by reminding you that our next webinar will be a co-organized with the Friends of Socialist China, as I was saying earlier. It will be called, hang on, I had it here, and where did it go? Yeah, here it is. Not here. Sorry. Sorry. Anyway, I think it's called basically a webinar about China and contrasting China and the United States foreign policy stances at this very critical time. And that will be at the same time on the 21st of June. And at 4 p.m. So we'll be sending out a invitation soon. In fact, I have it here now. Yes, the title is Imperialism versus Multipolarity, the US and China's Clashing Visions of the International Order. And we have some excellent speakers lined up, including Ben Norton, Jenny Clegg, Ken Hammond, Jackie Luckman, Mike Klonsky, Mick Dunford, Carlos Martinez. So all of these people will be there. Looking forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, this video is already on YouTube. We will soon be putting up on the International Manifesto Group website, YouTube channel, all the individual clips. So I hope you will help us expand our reach by sharing these videos on your social media, liking them, commenting on them, and generally recommending them to other people to watch. Because all our webinars take on a second life as recordings, as videos on the IMG YouTube channel. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you next time. Thanks to all the speakers, of course. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Radhika. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and make sure I save the chat and the transcript, but please feel free to leave if you want.